Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto. It's so good to be with you here on June 14, year 2022. And I just wanted to take a brief moment to welcome you to the live chat here and to let you know that at the end of this conversation, incredible conversation, you'll find out what I mean shortly, I'll be announcing the two winners of the latest book, kindly donated by author Kirby Sommers. It's The Epstein Project. And she's going to be talking about a very important section of this incredible book. So wait until the end. I'll be announcing the winners. Again, I welcome you to the live stream and be prepared for some really, really astounding information. And while it's on your mind, please subscribe to this channel, share it, build the numbers up there. I also have a Patreon if you're interested in supporting me. And hey, welcome again. Thanks very much. And thank you, Kirby Sommers. I think you might be watching live. I think she might be in the live stream. So I don't know if she's going to be there or not. We haven't talked about that, but check it out. Thank you very much. Bye. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Professor Hamamoto. The date is June 10, year 2022. The time, 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how excited I am to have a return guest, right? The lovely Kirby Sommers, the great author. And I happen to have one of her books. I was reading it in preparation for our, or rereading it in preparation for our talk today, which I'm sure you'll find engaging. And Ms. Sommers will tell you how to order the updated version and other volumes in her catalog of material here. And it's so important. This was only published in 2021, and rereading it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is what I would call a legacy project, a legacy book. And what I mean by that, you're going to return to this over and over again. It's part of the historical record. And our conversations here, and those of you who are subscribers to this channel and are followers of Ms. Sommers, subscription holders to not just her newsletter, but also her paid subscription, which I encourage you to do, will know that she's been on the show multiple times. And I'm saying this because I view, and this is the way I approach it, I view our conversations that we have here as part of a larger historical archive that the historians, the commentators of the present and into the future will look back to. So that's part of my function here. And toward the end, Ms. Sommers, I'd like to welcome you to the show, the return to the Professor Hamamoto channel, please.
It's just so, it's wonderful to be here. You're the most comfortable person I can speak with this stuff, and because you know everything about it and you understand how it fits into the historical context. I don't have to explain much to you. You're right there. And so I thank you so much. I sent you the updated version of the D.B. Cooper mystery as it pertains to the Epstein case and the 727. And you were like, yeah, let's talk about it. And so I have been anxiously awaiting today, and I know it'll be on Tuesday. And so as far as the Best of the Epstein Project book, which you just picked up, and thank you for that. Yeah, what that is, it's their essays from the Epstein Project newsletter, which, by the way, is short of its 4th year, commencing next month. So that just blows me away that I just can keep writing and keep investigating without falling dead or being, told to shut up. But the way that I want to sort of, I want to bring everyone's attention to the fact that there's a lot of pushback against, let's say, Project Artichoke, which is a survivor of Project Artichoke, which is one of the CIA's MK Ultra programs, is sort of being suppressed by a pretty well-known author by the name of Annie Jacobson, who is in fact, you can Google her, and she's with the Council of Foreign Relations, which is that's where Jeffrey Epstein uh, was a member of, Mark Epstein is still a member of. And so she's really, and I have heard you, Daryl, talk about Annie, and I don't know why people don't see that she's just what is it called? Disinformation person? What?
Yeah, I think in tradecraft they call it a limited hangout.
Got it.
Yeah. And
And
there's
so,
authors that
yeah.
do that. They perform that function. I think you hit upon a very important figure, Annie Jacobson, who fulfills that function.
Yeah, because there's so much information that, let's say, victims of these programs, this was an assassination program. We learned from the Jeffrey Epstein case, for example, that and also through the Franklin child abuse case, which Wikipedia calls a carefully constructed hoax. We learned that the government does have a child sex trafficking portion to it for blackmail purposes, but they also have and had an assassin training program. And so it was from one of these victims, now a grown man, who was part of Project Artichoke with another name, who told me the true identity of D.B. Cooper. And so I just wanted to lay that out before I even go into Cooper's history. And then at some point, of course, I'm going to tell you guys who he really is in real life.
Wonderful. Can
So
hardly wait. Yeah.
this is not something you're going to get from Annie Jacobson.
No. By the way, the strategy, I was talking to another friend and colleague of mine, Manny Grossman, yesterday. The strategy is to put a book out there and have the audience imprinted with that one book, and then everything else that comes after that, they'll defame it, and that's called imprinting. That's part of the strategy.
That's a good word for it because
Yes.
It's very apropos. So for everyone who was not around in 1971, because that was a long time ago, and even I really don't remember this, but I know it because I've done some digging into it. But on November 24th, so a day before Thanksgiving in 1971, a nondescript man using the alias Dan Cooper purchased a one-way ticket at the counter of Northwest Orient Airlines in Portland, Oregon, for flight number 305 to Seattle, Washington. He paid cash, which was not unusual for the time. We all used cash. Boarded a Boeing 727. And here I want to remind you that a Boeing 727 has a rear staircase that can fly with the rear staircase open, and that Jeffrey Epstein had a 727. And I'll get into that later. He wore a dark colored business suit with a white shirt and a clip-on black tie. He was said to be in his mid-40s. He was soft-spoken and he was well-mannered. And so while waiting for the flight to take off, he ordered a bourbon and soda from one of the stewardesses. There were two stewardesses on board, a little over 30 people flying on this day where, people are already at their destination. It's the day before Thanksgiving. And so not a lot of people on the plane. And I believe that he ordered the bourbon and the soda in order to get the attention of the stewardess, because as soon as the plane took off at approximately 3 p.m., he handed the same air stewardess a note. And assuming that he had given her his phone number, she just ignored it and she dropped it unread into her purse. Cooper basically had his eye on her. He leaned forward and he whispered, "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a bomb." And so to prove that he wasn't kidding, he cracked open his briefcase and he revealed to her the bundle of wires and the red dynamite sticks. And imagine seeing that. This is actually the first time in history that anything like this happened. He instructed her to sit by him. He wrote several notes during this time. She wrote some for him. I don't know how much of this is in actual mainstream media, But what he wanted in the ransom note was $200,000, which at the time was the most money that was ever requested of a hijacking or a ransom situation. In today's dollars, 200,000 is 1.3 million. He wanted $20 bills. And by the way, $20 bills for $200,000, this is how much detail I want you guys to absorb, weighs 21 pounds. He wanted 4 parachutes and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane. And so the stewardess takes the demand note to the captain. And once the flight landed in Seattle, Cooper allowed the passengers on board to leave, including that one stewardess, in exchange for the money and the parachutes. And so he had much better knowledge about the aircraft. And this, we know this because when they landed and he was given the money and the parachutes, he told the pilots to lower the rear of the rear staircase. And one pilot went berserk. He would say, I won't get back on the plane. He was terrified. So this shows that whoever DB Cooper is, who we will find out very soon, had better knowledge about the 727 than even the pilots on the plane. And so, not to distress the man too much, Cooper said, fine, in that case, let's let one of the other stewardesses stay on board and she will lower it once we are in the air. And so that's the way the second pilot got into the plane, and they went back into the air, at which point the stewardess lowered it. Everyone was in the front. So the stewardess with the pilots was in front. They didn't know that he had sort of jumped. So initially he instructed the pilot to fly to Mexico, and they told him, we don't have enough fuel for that long of a flight. And so the pilot suggested Reno, Nevada. Cooper sort of agreed that Nevada was fine. It was also interesting to them after the ordeal was over, because the second flight attendant who stayed did notice that Cooper had remarked, hey, it looks like Tacoma down there. So it showed that he had knowledge of the topography of the land, what's what. So he had to have been flying over that, I would think, on a regular basis.
This is Tacoma, Washington?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he kind of knew what was going on. So at approximately 8 o'clock between Seattle and Reno, he disappeared into the cold night and into the annals of history. What did he leave behind? He left behind the clip-on J.C. Penney black tie, which I think was a red herring. And I'm going to reveal, it's like almost like I want to do a drum roll. But he left that behind. And I'm going to say that when I saw that, after I was given the information about who he is, I thought that's interesting, because that reminds me, I just want to say it now. So David Boies is the attorney for many of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And he's a very, very wealthy man. He's probably close to being a billionaire himself. He's also was the attorney for Harvey Weinstein. And something that he's done, which intelligence agents do all the time, and in fact, you've discussed this also several times on your show, is they use magic, right? They use illusion. And so what he does when he goes to a court case, and now he's got Picassos on the walls of his many homes, but he has a closet full of cheap suits from Sears, and he wears a plastic watch strapped over the shirt cuff because it makes him look sympathetic. So it's just like a magical illusion. And so when I saw that Cooper had left his clip-on black JCPenney tie, I right away, it was like, bingo, he's telling me the truth. Because, well, do you think that's kind of like it was left behind for a reason? He was able to take 21 pounds of money, but he leaves behind the tie. Did you think that that was?
Right. Well, for the younger viewers, could you contextualize what J.C. Penney's means? What comes to mind? I know what it
Oh,
means. Yeah, what
what
the store?
like a Woolworth, like a very low rent.
Yeah, it's like Sears. It's like for working class. That's where my mother used to take me shopping. It's work for working class people. It's not Brook Brothers, okay? Brooks Brothers.
Right, it's not, and it's not even Bloomingdale's, although
No.
Bloomingdale's now is accessible to many people. But it was considered like a step above Woolworth,
Yes.
right? So that's the kind of tie that he left behind. And I always thought, okay, this makes sense. So drum roll, the person who told me the identity of DB Cooper, whose name I can't give you because he is I'll explain a little further later. But it's former CIA William Cooper, William Bill Cooper. And if you look at the photos, if you pull up the photos online of what DB Cooper looks like, and you pull up a photograph of what Bill Colby looks like, and you put those two photographs together, they look like the same person to me. Did it look like the same person to you when I sent you their photographs?
Yes, just add the horn rim glasses and it looks like William Colby.
Yeah, and actually he kept Cooper while he was on the flight. He wore a pair of sunglasses.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it would make sense to me that they were prescription, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eyeglasses. Um, a young teenage boy sat nearby and noticed that that Cooper was wearing thermal long underwear because he saw that it extended into the gap between Cooper's pant cuffs and the loafers that he wore. So to me, again, that was sort of like he planned. He was going to jump out of an airplane, and it was a little bit of a chilly night, but he was prepared. Um, but you did see the resemblance, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So
I
I'm
mean,
gonna get.
not back then. I mean, before I bought the story when I was a
You bought
kid.
the story?
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was a working class guy who pulled a big heist, got one over on the government, like anti-government type guy, like what they would call today a militia person, right?
Oh, that's fascinating. I've not known anyone who knew about the story other than now you. Can you tell me how you heard about it and what your initial thoughts
Okay.
were and what happened at the time?
This was before the age of cable TV. We only had the three major networks and the independent channel. This is before the internet, of course. So we had to rely on Newsweek and Time and Life magazine and the Los Angeles Times, which we know now are part of Project Mockingbird, right?
Yeah.
So our vision was very, very constrained. And it was a sensational case back in the 70s. There was nothing like, and if I heard you correctly, this was really the first airplane hijacking in history. Is that right?
Yes, and it's also the only unsolved case since Jack the Ripper. It is the
Uh-huh.
most famous case. It's never been solved until today on your show.
Thanks to you.
Well, thanks to the survivor of that one of those projects that Annie Jacobson keeps trying to dismiss as being nothing.
Right.
Um,
Well, we owe that person a debt of gratitude. Thank you very much, whoever you are. I don't want to know your identity, but thank you very much.
well, I will say that he was involved. They trained The CIA at the time, and still, they have a fascination, as we discovered during the 1975 Church Committee hearings, where not just the uh, MK Ultra project was revealed, but also was revealed, if you remember, the heart attack gun, right? So they had a fascination with all types of assassination schemes. Um, so one thing that this person has been used for is an assassination against a very prominent politician, and it was newsworthy around the world. And I won't say when, and I won't say who, but all of his information checked out, everything he told me. So he checks out 100%. He also said that he regularly sees an MK. I use MK and he does for me uh, as a blanket, descriptor for this. It's mind control. Let's just use it mind that he on a regular basis he still has to see CIA connected psychiatrist, and in fact, the one that he sees is located in New Mexico, not far from Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Island, and I thought that was fascinating. Mm. I mean, right? I mean, just it's these psychiatrists, some of them.
Right. Zorro Ranch.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
The Zorro Ranch. So I just want to go into a little bit, if you don't mind, Colby's history, because I think it's just fascinating. I do want to say before I get into his whole thing that the 727, the Boeing 727 was the CIA's airline of choice. And it was because of the way it was built. If you are able to open the rear while you're in flight, it allows you to drop the guns and the drugs in other countries. And while this was exposed in Iran-Contra, it had started long before. And in fact, it started during the Vietnam time, where Colby was the director of the program, of the Phoenix program, and he spent a lot of time there. And I think when I sent you that email, didn't you say that for fun, they used to drop from these airlines in Vietnam, they used to just drop some cocaine and you called it Charlie? And I'm like, oh, how does he know it's called Charlie?
Yes, and they referred to it as hard rice. Supposedly it was rice supplies, but it was armaments to the mercs in Cambodia or Laos primarily. And they put it out in the back. I guess they put them on skids and they sent them out the back of the 727, probably the military version of the Boeing 727. By the way, isn't Boeing located the headquarters in Seattle, or is that Douglas, or both?
I don't know.
Okay.
Where they're located.
Because he was heading towards Seattle, supposedly, right? The hijacker, D.B. Cooper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was headed towards Seattle. Now, I do want to say also that a few years later, let me just find it here. In 1980, an 8-year-old boy on a camping trip with his family while digging a fire pit found $5,800 of Cooper's heist at Tina Bar, which is a stretch of beach located along the Washington side of the Columbia River. Now, just like the black clip-on tie from J.C. Penney, the $5,800, which was initially thought to have dropped at the same time that he jumped out of the plane, was actually a red herring. It had been discovered. Oh, you didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that because that story came out much later, right? The discovery of the money.
Yeah. In 1980, but since then, it has been, even in mainstream, that the money had been put there after, because there was no way that the condition of the money, with the knowledge that we subsequently had, there was no way for it to have been in the water that long. Mm-hmm. And so it was, it is now assumed that, yes, it was put there later. So who's the only person that could have put it there later was the hijacker himself, as a red herring, sort of like, okay. But what's fascinating is that, and everyone knows that, I think everyone knows that William Cooper would later in life be assassinated himself, that his body was sort of left in his, it's just the way that the CIA works. The fingerprints of how they leave their clues can be seen in the hijacking of the 727 in 1971, in the uh, way that the money, $5,800, was found. Um, and what's interesting to me is I went on a couple of, there are old Facebook groups that popped up about a decade ago, because I didn't know that there was so much fascination with DB Cooper. And I went on to a couple of their things, and I see that people are beginning to start saying, oh, he had DB Cooper, he had to be intelligence. And he had to be connected because the FBI had to have been told to back off and to put forth a lie to the public. So they're on the right track. They have not named Colby, and maybe after today they will, and everybody will be on board. But Colby's life is fascinating to me, and I just want to, with your permission.
Oh, please, yes.
Okay, so let me find my Colby file here.
Well, very briefly, just to show you how important this DB Cooper, quote unquote, hijacking was in the popular culture, there was even a country tune that was a tribute to DB Cooper. It was called The Ballad of DB Cooper.
No way. Really?
Yeah, it was played on the radio, AM radio. Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a super big deal.
That's fascinating. I was able to find the newspaper images, that came out in the next day or two or three of mainstream media. And I was just fascinated by the way it just caught the world by surprise. It had never happened. And it's still unsolved. It's a fascinating case. But I didn't know he had his own song.
I can't remember the artist who did it, but it got a lot of play.
Okay. All right. Well, William Cooper, I'm sorry, see, to me, he's one person. So that's a Freudian slip in the right direction. So William Egan Colby was born in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1920. He's the son of an Army officer. His early life was spent in various posts, along with, his father and his family. And he spent 3 years in China. In 1950, he graduated from Princeton. However, in 1941, at the age of 21, he joined the United States Army. He served in the parachute field artillery. He got parachute training, and he also got training in demolitions and in small arms. And that's rarely seen anywhere, but I was able to find that digging through a lot of archival material. And so that even if he had pulled, and I believe he had help because he, after all, was Colby. But, everything that I found about him fits the DB Cooper thing. So when he was in the Office of Strategic Services, which we know is the O.S.S., which is the precursor of the CIA, they wanted somebody who spoke French, and he spoke French. And so he volunteered, and in 1944, he parachuted behind enemy lines in north central France to work with the resistance unit. And then shortly before the end of the war, in 1945, he led a team, and they, into Norway, they just jumped out of their planes to destroy a rail line used for transporting German reinforcements. And then following the war, he obtained his law degree. This guy is a very accomplished man from where else but Columbia Law School. So we have a Bill Barr,
No,
Donald
sorry, I
Barr.
don't have the other book with that great art on it. Your book, with
Oh,
Bill Barr,
yeah.
that caricature on the cover.
That was made by a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, who has never stepped forward.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that,
That
but
art.
thank you, whoever you are. You're doing great work, artwork.
Yeah. It's not the one that people have heard about the art. But one thing I do want to say about art, and I learned this through this one person who gave me Colby's name as it pertains to D.B. Cooper. They look for creative individuals. And so in his case, he's very creative as well. He is connected, he's written songs for the people that have written some hit songs. He's written them. And so that we see a creativity in terms of art, in terms of songwriting, in terms of, having an open mind, being used by the CIA for their purposes is interesting to me. So after he got his law degree at Columbia Law School, he joined the law firm headed by William Donovan, who was the former head of the O.S.S. And in 1949, he accepts his first government position as the attorney for the Labor Relations Board in Washington. I want to stop here and talk about the fact that one of the attorneys in the Jeffrey Epstein victim situation
Okay, now
was
that is the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell. Is that correct? He joined the firm, Sullivan and Cromwell?
He actually joined a law firm by another guy that was CIA. Let me just find it. William Donovan.
Right.
The former head of the O.S.S. So Donovan had a law firm.
Oh, his own firm. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes.
Donovan had a law firm. So one of the attorneys, Stanley Pottinger, who's like 82 at this point, and he dated Gloria Steinem, who is a known CIA asset. And in fact, it is now known through my work and the slip up of several people that he too is CIA, but he worked as the assistant attorney general for the civil, during the time of the Nixon administration. He was in there, and he was in there serving a dual purpose. And I say this because Colby was also there, right? So he was also part of this little circle as the first secretary of the American Embassy, later in Saigon, the chief of the Far East Division of the Central Intelligence Agency in Washington. In March of 1968, Colby joined the Agency for International Development and was posted to Saigon. And so initially he began as the assistant chief of staff, and then he was, sort of promoted to what the government of Vietnam, what they called it the pacification campaign, but we know it today as what it really was, right? It was a campaign of terror. The person that wrote a really good book about Colby's time in Vietnam is Doug Valentine, who I think a lot of our mutual followers will know. He wrote a book called The Phoenix Program. And he, when he was younger, he befriended Colby, and Colby allowed him into the CIA, and he would later regret it. But he was able to get a lot of firsthand information from the CIA agents because Colby thought he was one of them. And so when Douglas finally published his book, Colby realized, oh my God, you're the enemy, meaning that he was a truth teller, that he
That
wasn't
book
going to
had the
keep.
family jewels in it, so to speak.
Right, right. So he basically told the world the truth about the Phoenix program. And let me just,
Those authors, man, there's something about these people. You're one of them.
you know, if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
True.
You
This
know,
is the
there's,
only justice we're going to get from this corrupt system. You're bringing it, man.
but so are you.
Because look at, you wrote, Ghislaine Maxwell skated, just like you said. She
Yep.
skated, she walked. So you're bringing this is my expanded definition of justice that you're bringing to us.
Well, thank you for that. It's
Yeah.
very flattering coming, especially from you. Um, there's been just so much violence and unnecessary pain to all of us, and for much longer than we believed, right? So while we're talking about Vietnam, which was like the 1960s, let's call the highlight into the 70s, the atrocities of what goes on behind the scenes preceded that, right? Because we have the heroin coming in from Marseille in the 1950s, and later it becomes the French Connection. But the Phoenix program was a CIA operation run by Colby in Vietnam, and essentially it consisted of the cold-blooded assassination of civilians. So we have arrests without any, no, you don't have to break the law. You're just on the list. Somebody gives a rumor, somebody gives your name. It's, sort of like what happened in Germany with the Jewish people, that somebody just shows up and knocks at your house, on the door of your house, and takes you into a camp. This happened in Vietnam. I don't see anybody talking about this. This is an atrocity, you and frankly, they're saying things that we're going to be exposed to something similar to that. And I hope that we beat them uh, down to the point where no, we're not going to ever see that again. But what they would do is, in order to make people comply, they would take their children and rape them in front of their parents, and then rape the wife in front of the husband, and then stab them with their bayonet, rifles. What do you call those things with the pointy knife on it? Is it a bayonet?
It's a bayonet if it's attached to a rifle. Yes.
Yeah, and just this cold-blooded killing of innocent men, women, and children. And the numbers, quite frankly, mainstream media, if you look hard enough, it says 20,000 lives, because later there was some pushback on Colby, and some people started to call him a sort of like a war terrorist, right? A war criminal. But it didn't stop anyone from then hiring him to run the CIA. And, he was hired by Richard Nixon, the biggest crook of our political life. But I mean, how much did you know about the Phoenix program, which is like, all this torture, murder, and rape?
Well, I had been reading about it through the late 60s and 70s through the independent press when it was truly independent, including publications like the Rolling Stone, which today is a globalist New World Order,
Right.
corporatist, fascist rag. But back then, the independent, like the LA Free Press, the Berkeley Barb, that had all those stories in it. Even the progressive press, these were leftists, the old left, the new old leftists, or the old new left. Today, the leftists are fascists, but back then, that's where I was getting all this information. And as you cited earlier, it was all put together in that great foundational book by Douglas Valentine, The Phoenix Program, which is
Yeah.
still in print. Everybody has to read that one.
Oh,
But
yeah,
yeah.
that's a must read. He and I are friends, and he's just a wonderful guy. But you know what? They're getting to him because he's had some health issues.
Mhm.
And when you have these unexplained health issues, and they've affected his eyesight, his
Mhm.
hearing,
Mhm.
I don't think that's a mistake. He's still a young guy, in my opinion. Like, I think he's 66 or 67. To me, that's still a young guy.
Mhm.
But he's sick. And I think the only reason, and I don't tell him, but I'm saying it right here, I almost hope he doesn't hear me, but I think that this is an intent, you know, like he's a marked guy.
He's
But
still
anyway,
writing, by the way. He's still writing, and there are a
yeah,
couple of
he
other
just,
books that are probably the equal to Phoenix Program, updated and expanded. So you want to check out his whole work.
yeah,
Yeah.
Douglas is a wonderful researcher and a great author. And in fact, just last month or the month before, he put out his most recent book.
Mm.
So, okay, on May 10th, 1973, Richard Nixon, who is the president, nominates Bill Colby as the director of the Central Intelligence. And now this is at the time of the family jewels, as we have discussed on your show previously. The family jewels was an internal CIA document of 600 and something pages. It was almost a 700-page document listing and documenting the crimes committed, literally the crimes committed by the CIA, who, by the way, does not have a charter. I want you to please explain to our followers here how the CIA does not have a charter to operate in the United States, because I say it and I get too upset. So I'm going to let you fill that in for me, please.
Well, the folklore is that the FBI handles the domestic side, and then the CIA does the foreign side of it. And there's a strict firewall that separates it. You can tell by my tone of voice I'm being ironic,
Yeah,
because it's there are no rules. They make them up as they go along.
yeah, and so the CIA clearly meddles into domestic affairs here in the United States, which was discovered during the Church Committee hearings of 1975. And so Colby becomes the director of the CIA at a time where there's a lot of it's a very tumultuous 2.5 years. Um, the Church Committee is led by Senator Frank Church, who wanted, and he put him on the stand, and he wanted to know about the illegal programs the CIA was operating. Among these was this MK Ultra program, which targeted unsuspecting children and adults. And Colby told the truth, but he told partial truth, right? One of these programs, and I went back into some historical documents, and I was able to retrieve something that reminded me of Jeffrey Epstein's Interlochen summer camp. And I just want to, because I have the name here and people can look for this stuff. You know, this is not stuff that I pull out of thin air. This is all documented historical information. Let me just, if you don't mind my.
Sure. And Interlochen is that program for musically gifted children, such as Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, and the place that allowed him, as a grown man, to build a home for himself. And in fact, one of the witnesses in the recent Ghislaine Maxwell case was 13 years old when she met Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, where? At Interlochen, and sort of, you know, under their wing for years. So I believe that Interlochen is similar to the Children's International Summer Village. Now, the goal of the program on paper was to this is still around, by the way, the Children's International Summer Village. So theoretically, the objective was to research how children who spoke different languages were able to communicate. However, internal documents reveal that the real reason that the CIA used this summer camp was to identify agents, right? Future, so the children, so that again, we're reminded that the children that were selected by, let's say, Epstein, right? were agents used for government-sponsored programs. And in Epstein's case, I believe with with all of the information that I've obtained from multiple sources, that it was a combined effort between the CIA and Israel's Mossad, because historically, and there are documents to back this up, the Iran-Contra situation, the United States worked with Mossad. The United States worked with Mossad on many covert operations. Colby would eventually, after the church committee hearings, where he was grilled about the gun, the heart attack gun. Remember, there's a very famous photo of Frank Church seated next to none other than John Tower, who was an asset for Robert Maxwell, holding up the gun. You remember that picture?
Oh yeah, that photo is really famous. This is during the hearings. Yes.
During the hearings. And so he holds the CIA's heart attack gun. It was a modified Colt 11, and it's electrically powered by a battery and fires an extremely small bullet of ice with frozen shellfish toxin in the center. And so Mary Ombre,
I think that's called saxitoxin, by the way. Saxitoxin.
What is it called?
Saxitoxin. That's the shellfish poison. Saxitoxin.
And the person who gets the shot from that specific gun doesn't feel that they've been shot at all. In fact, it feels like a bee sting. And then they die.
By the way, the rumor has it that right up here near the ski area where I am, that U.S. Representative Salvatore Bono, known as Sonny Bono, as of Sonny and Cher, that's how he met his fateful heir on the his fateful end on the ski slopes, with one of those
really
melting icicle guns. Yes.
Why would they want him gone?
Well, the rumor has it that he was about to go public with the giant child trafficking situation.
Wow.
Yeah. So he had a skiing accident. That seems to be a very popular location for.
Interesting. All of these accidents, and it's what she said. This former CIA employee, not an asset, but an employee, that the gun could pierce through clothing. So that makes sense to me. That he would be, skiing. That's just, I mean, to think of all of these horrible assassinations and murders. So eventually, though, what comes around, what's that phrase? What comes around goes around?
Yes.
Because Colby would also be, he would die suddenly. And I just want to go over his death before I get into Jeffrey Epstein's 727, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay, so on May 7th of 1996, so he's left the CIA in 1975, but I do want to say, because there's always so much information, that when a CIA asset as important as Colby leaves, he doesn't really leave. So what did they do with him? And again, it's hard to find this information. I had to work very, very hard to find this. So he continued, remember, he's an attorney, right? So he continued to work for the New Gun Hand Bank, which was part of what? The BCCI, which would eventually have its own committee headed by who? The current president, right? So headed by and I have a block because he is Ira Rickless's best friend. What is the current president's name, please?
China Joe Biden.
There you go. And all these guys, they're connected. And for me, I have blocks with some of their names because
I understand, yes.
I think, am I the only author who was a sex slave turned
So far as I
researcher.
know, you're it. You do have a
Turned
unique perspective, that's for sure. Backed by just incredible research and sources.
and good sources. And I think they feel comfortable because I'm in the same boat, so to speak, you know, and I put my life on the line and it's okay. You've tried to kill me 3 times, but you haven't succeeded because as you said, I'm protected by my blood type. They can't get rid of me.
You are Rh negative.
I am. So it was only through you that I thought, okay, well, let me keep going.
Beautiful. All right,
um,
proceed, please. Give us
Okay,
the.
so they put him in charge of the BCCI bank, and really even his sons. He has a couple of sons. One of his sons, Jonathan Colby, who is today 74. He's a managing director at where? The Carlyle Group. Didn't we just recently hear something about the Carlyle Group in relation to Ghislaine Maxwell's court case? Yes, it was that one jury person who was almost threw the whole case out the door because he didn't check that as a child he had been sexually assaulted, and it almost threw the case out. He was worked for the Carlyle Group, which is the CIA front. Okay, so Colby serves for 2.5 tumultuous years, and then he gets fired, but he goes on to work in another role. But then he gets murdered. On May 7th, 1996, Bill Colby's body washes up on the shore of the Wicomico, Maryland River near his canoe, except that Colby had a country house on Cobb Island, Maryland. The canoe was found 9 days earlier. The locals thought it was odd. They knew the currents in the river well enough to know that when a boat slipped its moorings, it didn't end up in the particular cove where his boat was. And so Colby's boat was found in a cove, and there was sand inside the boat. Locals speculated that somebody had put the canoe in there and had anchored it with sand. And so they checked up and down the shore, but they didn't find his body. And Colby, by the way, he's an expert in survival. Let's remember he parachuted behind enemy lines in France and Norway with the O.S.S. He was also one of the most calculating and careful men on the planet. He never went boating without his life jacket, and the life jacket was missing from his house, but it was nowhere to be found. So after the locals combed the area and found nothing, Colby's body suddenly appeared floating on the banks of the river. And many people speculate that his body was indeed put there. But the coroner's office in Maryland, what did they do? They ruled his death an accident, and ironically, they said he probably had a heart attack. Now, did you buy this story when it came out about Colby's death?
No, by that time I was sophisticated enough to see through the smoke.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you knew that something was up,
Oh
right?
yeah. By that time the literature had started to build and books had come out, and yeah, but that doesn't mean that the case is closed. You're raising some issues that they can, because there's no statute of limitations on murder, right?
No, but if
Yeah.
you're a CIA agent and you kill in the line of duty,
Mhm.
there have been cases, and you can get away with murder. All you have to do is say, "I did it under orders of the CIA," and they dismiss the case. So they have the ability to murder with impunity.
Right, unless it was subcontracted. Don't they typically put the gun in someone else's hand or whatever
Yeah, they
weapon?
do
Yeah.
so, and then that's actually why they created a partnership with what used to be called the mafia and the mob, because
Mhm.
they would put the gun in somebody else's hand and it would give them plausible deniability, which is needed, and also someone to blame. But then, that person would be exonerated in some way. But as I pointed out today, the person who gave me this information is a trained CIA assassin from the time that he was a child. And so they have their own assassins working for them.
I see.
I mean, you know, they're just, you know, that's probably their number one mission is to murder the leaders of other countries, right? And murder people to keep them in line. So Jeffrey Epstein, as everyone knows, had a similar 727. In Epstein's case, it was a 1969 Boeing 727. It was given to him by Leslie Wexner, the former CEO of L Brands, who also owned Victoria's Secret. Now, there's no public record of the transaction, but we know that's where it came from because he said so. The plane had been used commercially for approximately 10 years before it was acquired by Wexner. And Epstein did an interesting thing to the floor of the plane, which is in mainstream media. He padded it so that he could have sex 10,000 feet in the air. However, it wasn't just him having sex. We have to remember that, let's say, for example, in January of 2002, former President Bill Clinton, his assistant Doug Band, and two of his Secret Service details are listed on a flight log from Japan to Hong Kong. He's been said to have been on Epstein's 727, which has been dubbed the Lolita Express, 27 times. And so the abuse, let's call it abuse because that's what it was, the sex slaves, and not just the young women that we've heard from, you know, the teenagers who are now in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. But it wasn't just them, you know, it was boys also. And it wasn't just your all-American white poor girl. There was a mixture, sort of the same kind of mixture that ran around with Andy Warhol's crowd. You know, you had your debutantes and you had your society, and then you had your up-and-coming struggling people, right, who wanted in and would do anything. So that kind of is similar to the kind of crowd that became part of the trafficking world of Jeffrey Epstein. However, on the island, the airport workers did report that they saw a lot of underage girls arrive because they had to first land on the main island, which is St. Thomas, and then they would take the helicopter that Ghislaine Maxwell would fly because she had a pilot's license. She also had a submarine license. The woman had a license for anything that moved, and she knew how to, you know, work that license. And then you either got on a boat to go to his island, or you got on the helicopter to go to his island. What they said and they noticed is that not that many, so a lot of the girls would arrive, but not all of them would leave. So that they thought it was odd. However, because he tipped well, I mean, come on, because somebody tips well, they just overlooked it. And that's troubling, right? That because he tipped well, they overlooked that all of the girls that came into the island, not all of them left. So what happened to them? Well, Courtney Love allegedly told her father, Hank Harrison, who is also alleged to have been a covert CIA, right? Yes. Have you heard that about Hank Harrison?
Yes, I've been researching the Kurt and Courtney story for quite a while now. Yeah. And she herself supposedly had been trafficked, Courtney Love. Yeah. She'd been trafficked in Japan, or to Japan.
Because I know that she was a stripper in her youth at some point. Yes. And you know, when you're stripping, there's a thin line between stripping and prostitution. Mm-hmm. So you heard that she was also doing that in Japan?
Yeah, she had been trafficked probably by her own father. Yeah.
That's horrifying, but it doesn't surprise me.
Mhm.
So allegedly, Courtney told Hank Harrison that she witnessed worn out girls who were no longer of any value to Jeffrey Epstein taken out to the desert. I'm going to choke up. Wait, I have to calm down a little bit. Taken out to the desert and buried, and then others were weighed down and dumped into the sea. It's a terrifying thing to even, think about. But then I knew that, I'd done a lot of work with the Franklin child scandal, which is very similar to the Epstein case. And many people have talked, among them, Rusty Nelson. He was a photographer for Larry King of the Franklin child abuse scandal. And for people who are unfamiliar with the Franklin child abuse case, it is in 1988, that's sort of when it became public to the world. However, it only lasted a very short time because then it was suppressed. But there were allegations that prominent citizens of Nebraska and very high level politicians were involved in a child prostitution ring, and alleged abused victims were interviewed. This connected also not just to the MK Ultra program, but to a place called Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska. The claims primarily centered around Lawrence E. King, who was a prominent Black Republican, and when they also obtained children, as I said, in Boys Town, Nebraska. But the pushback was so intense that if you were to go to Wikipedia, it will say that it was a carefully constructed hoax. However, it wasn't. It was just like the Epstein thing. It's just that these things, they're all part of the same tree, and we see the tip of it every now and then. We've been very fortunate in that we've seen a lot more than just the tip in the Jeffrey Epstein case. Although now that Glenn is going to be sentenced on the 28th of June, which is around the corner, mainstream media has begun to push back, and they're literally saying, we saw no sign that Epstein was intelligence. And remember, it was Alexander Acosta himself who put out that allegation years ago. But they're saying, oh, we looked and we didn't find. So the cover up is now in earnest. But let's go back to Rusty Nelson, who was a photographer for Larry King. And he described being taken to Offutt, Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska by King, where he, with some of the children, were used for MK Ultra experiments. King also allegedly delivered children to Area 51, where they were auctioned off to people from all parts of the world. And as disturbing as the sale of children is, and in fact, there was a very famous DJ artist, Avicii, who did a video and a song. Are you familiar with Avicii?
No, no. How do you spell that? I'll check it out.
Avicii. I met him in Florida because my nephew was a DJ and they knew each other.
Uh-huh.
But so does it come up Avicii in his mysterious death?
Uh-huh. Okay.
Tell me what you find.
Yeah, I'll check it out afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So he these child auctions have been talked about, and so one of the child abuse victims has said that they were taken to Area 51. Now, just to get back to the DB Cooper situation, when he agreed to Reno, Nevada, we have Area 51 not far from there. And we also have some Air Force bases in the areas that he wanted to be dropped off.
That would be Nellis Air Force Base? perhaps Nellis, Area
Well,
51?
there are like a couple of in the places that he selected. So he selected Mexico as his first choice, and that's a CIA hub. You know, that's where they sort of did their Iran Contra situation and a lot of their Vietnam stuff. But also the secondary place that was selected is a hub. You know, it's got intelligence agency hubs there in addition to Air Force. And of course, it's where Area 51 is. But the other thing that was said was that King, while on a 727 en route maybe to Area 51 or wherever they were going, he would randomly select a child and pick up whether it was a little boy or a little girl, but in the Franklin case, they were primarily boys, and they would just throw their screaming little bodies out of the plane without a parachute, you know, so like that these children were terrified into obeying because they did not want to be the kid that was picked up by this horrific man who, by the way, is walking among us today, this King person who was like an Epstein, but he was allowed to live, and just murdered children in that manner. So the fact is that there has been an eyewitness who corroborates the concept of children being thrown out of the plane. Now we have to ask ourselves, why did Colby? Oh, and I do want to make another point. So my question to the very brave victim survivor who told me that Colby was indeed our CIA director, former director, he said that had he been caught, he planned on saying that he was just testing the capability of the 727 for use, you know, for the CIA's use in Vietnam, which they were using it a lot for. But one has to wonder, based on what we now know of Jeffrey Epstein and what we know of the Franklin scandal, if in fact William Colby, in the guise of D.B. Cooper, was testing it and testing the jumping capability for, I don't, you know, I haven't let my mind go that far, but I'm going to pose it to you. Could he have been testing it for that purpose of where would the bodies land of the children to make sure? I mean, I don't know. Do you think that's a possibility?
Certainly, and I think it was there was a ritualistic element to it, inaugurating a new MO that they were going. They, meaning these agencies you're talking about, these interlocking entities, they were ringing in a new form of child sacrifice from the air, from the sky.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I had not seen it in form of it being a sacrifice, but that very well could be, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you talked about magic, right?
Yeah,
They're involved with ritual magic, word magic, mind magic, control. By the
right.
way, before I forget, isn't it kind of curious, and I mean this ironically, of course, that the government, or what purports to be our government, are now, just now, right before the announcement of the sentencing of Ghislaine Maxwell, that they're taking seriously all these issues about extraterrestrials and off-planet entities.
I
Right now,
know.
they're going to investigate, Area 51. Do you think that's a smokescreen, or Ms.
Of
Sommers? Do you have
course.
any comment about on
I,
that one?
I believe nothing they said.
Okay.
Everything that you know, I have not watched. I have a television in my apartment, but it's unplugged, and it's been unplugged since 2009. I don't. I used to avidly read the New York Times. I don't haven't bought one in forever. I just I've become very jaded, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I've become jaded. In 2013, in closing, historian Randall Woods, he published a biography of Colby. And I'm not giving this book a plug. I'm only giving the cover a plug. So if you want to pull up the cover, everyone, it's really, I just thought it was fascinating. And he called it Shadow Warrior. And the front cover shows Colby flying through the air on a parachute. And while Woods may have meant it as an homage to Colby's days in Vietnam, to me, when I saw it, I saw the man in 1971 who slipped into the best spy disguise of any actor, tops any James Bond films, that I saw Bill Colby in the role of D.B. Cooper, jumping through the air. And that's basically what I saw when I saw the cover of the book. So and then while I've closed my presentation, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about Colby having been D.B. Cooper, because like you've been pretty cool and nonchalant during our long chat here.
I think your argument really holds up. My only question is, how old was William Colby when he made that fateful jump from the Boeing
He was
720?
51, and
That's kind of old. He's kind of
no,
old.
no.
No.
He's always in, come on, you're still in top physical shape. And the guy, they thought he was in his mid 40s.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
like, so if they think he's 45, let's call mid 40s 45. Colby, who took care of himself, he was not overweight a day in his life.
Plus, he did a lot of canoeing, which is a really physical active,
Yeah, and so if he's
arduous. Yeah.
if he's 6 years older than the guy who theoretically was 45, that's that, they thought he was 45. So everything fits.
Well, that was my only reservation, because, hey, whatever age you are, you could be 25 years old. It's really, it takes a great deal of mental discipline, physical discipline to jump out of an aircraft at any height, right? But he did it because he had that experience.
He had that experience from the time he was very young.
Right.
And he was fearless. I mean, I think I mentioned that he lived in his, and I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I'll restate it, that one of his friends went to see him one time at his home at his main home. And he discovered that Colby didn't have a lock on his door. He didn't have any kind of nothing. And when he was questioned about it, Colby said, "I'm not going to live with fear." And he never did. And in fact, when he was in Vietnam, when they would go on their night tours, he was the only military guy that walked around, and he's the head guy. But he walked around without guards, and the others would walk around with guards, but he literally lived his life without fear. One thing I will add is I've become really fascinated with him. It's almost the way that people become fascinated with the Israeli Mossad agent Rafi Eitan. Colby seems to have had a very good split personality. So like on the one hand, he was considered so nondescript, which is actually how D.B. Cooper was described. He was considered so nondescript that if he went into a restaurant, he would disappear. That's the sign of a spy, right? If you want to just melt into the atmosphere, you disappear.
He's the shadow. He's the shadow warrior.
Shadow, right? So that he would go into a restaurant and maybe he could not get the attention of the waitress, right? However, what does he do? Or at around the time that he makes this jump, right, a couple of years later, he buys himself a red Corvette. He drops his older wife and he marries a very young woman. So he's got this duality, right? I mean, don't you think that's a dual? So here his exterior is Mr. Beige Man, even like his glasses, they were tinted pink, so they just melted into his skin.
Hmm.
But he has a red Corvette and a young wife at home. He's just a
Wow.
fascinating character to me.
See,
But
I didn't know that he had that sporting side to him as well with the Corvette. I mean, that's pretty conspicuous. Was it a convertible, and did his girlfriend
of
wear a little
course,
headscarf
of course, I mean
with
that's
dark
the
glasses, like
every
Valerie
guy.
Plame, the
There you go.
Plame couple?
Every guy with their midlife crises goes into that red car. But for me, when I think of DB Cooper, and I've known this now for a couple of years, I see William Colby, and I hope that I've brought some new little tidbits of information for our followers, um, and our fellow sleuths to start poking at, and perhaps someone can come up with um, a second person to confirm that in fact it was Colby.
Well, I think your case holds together, but since you mentioned crisis, not so much male midlife crisis, but I wanted to pose to you, as you know, and you mentioned this in your great newsletter, which everybody should subscribe to, that he was a devout Roman Catholic. And I know from other sources that there was a chapel either on Cobb Island or one of the neighboring islands that he went to regularly. So could it be, and maybe it could be a legend, I don't know, I'm asking you, could it be that Colby had a crisis of conscience being a Roman Catholic, and he was about ready to really come forth with what he's been doing with his life?
One of his sons recently created or a documentary or wrote a book suggesting that that was the case, and
That's
in
Carl
fact,
Colby. Carl
yes,
Colby, yes.
yes,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and that he felt that his father had committed suicide because of the very same thing you just suggested. His second wife was very vocal in saying, "You're wrong. He was murdered." And in fact, Carl never obtained the input of either Colby's second wife or his siblings, who also do not agree with him. So Carl Colby, for whatever the reason, seems to want to put forth the very thing that you're suggesting. And will we ever know? How do we know what's inside a man's heart? And I almost think that at some level, I mean, he was always a company man, if you will. There's a certain pride. His sons continue to work on some in some way or another, and grandchildren connected to intelligence. So I don't think if your whole company, your mind is the company mind, and your children and grandchildren are part of the company, I don't think you have much the ability to regret.
Mhm. He's past the point of repentance, even as a devout Catholic, because you can redeem yourself and you can repent no matter what heinous crimes you have committed, according to Roman Catholic theology. So I'm just leaving that door open for those people who might be going through a similar type of crisis and saying that, hey, it's never too late to come clean and work on the behalf of goodness and righteousness instead of serving evil, even though you were seduced into thinking that you were on the side of God.
Well, I mean, the whole thing was, I think, during Colby's life, it was in the sort of aftermath of the Cold War, and all of these agents, both in the O.S.S. and in the CIA, believed they were working against the communist threat, right?
Mm.
So we have horrific people coming out of that, like uh, Cohn. What was his first name? Roy
Roy,
Cohn.
Roy,
Yeah,
yes,
who was Donald
Donald
Trump.
Trump's lawyer.
lawyer and mentor. We have horrific people coming out of that. So we have to ask ourselves, is somebody like Roy Cohn, who visually is the opposite of someone like Bill Colby, did Cohn experience these inner doubts? I don't know. I think that when you choose your path and that's your path for, 70 years, does it change when you're 71? I don't think so.
Okay, that answers that, and we'll leave it to the audience to ponder that one. I always like to leave the door open for people who want to enter the ranks of the righteous instead of serving evil.
Right. Well,
I
I
don't want
do
to
want
back people in a corner. I always want to say, hey,
you're so kind.
Yeah.
You're really good even to our bad guys.
They're the bad guys of today could be the good guys of tomorrow. That's the way I look at it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I want to urge your audience to subscribe to your channel because I know you never ask, and I think that you should ask at the beginning of the show and at the end of the show.
All right.
But subscribe, people, and like this video and join his Patreon. I'm a member of his Patreon. He gives so much more than, like, I don't have a lot of time for my Patreon because I give it all to my newsletter. But join his Patreon and support the nicest guy in our industry who we need to like triple these numbers. We're almost at 10. Let's get him to 100,000.
Oh, I appreciate that. And guess what? Your interviews have like number in the thousands.
I know. I'm so surprised at the high number of views.
That doesn't surprise me, but you're like way up there. I like that for your sake, for our sake. Yeah, the word's getting out.
Well, thank you for having me back, and I'm sure I'll be back again not too long from now.
But before we go, then this interview is going to air this coming Tuesday. I don't know what the exact date is, but tell us about your forthcoming book, how to obtain it, your Patreon, all the social media, about subscribing to your newsletter, all of it, please.
Well, our show that we just taped will come out on Tuesday, the 14th. And the D.B. Cooper is actually a chapter out of my book, The Best of the Epstein Project, which is on Amazon. It's also available on my website, kirbysommers.com. If you're not following me on Twitter, please do. It's Kirby Sommers. Every Tuesday, well, not every Tuesday, because sometimes I do a double newsletter, but my big finds, I share them with people who are on my mailing list, which commencing next month begins my 4th year for my Epstein Project newsletter. I do send out an occasional free one to, I now have thousands and thousands and thousands of people who subscribe to the free one. And I also, to my shock, have thousands subscribe to my paid newsletter, which helps me with information for my books. My book on Ghislaine Maxwell was recently chosen by Amazon to be featured. They select the best of. And I'm just surprised that, and my Billionaire's Woman, people are picking that up like it was a treat. And it was the most difficult book to put out because it's sort of like an invitation into my bedroom during the time that I was somebody's sex toy. So that was a very painful book to put out. But I've been able to distance myself because so many people, not just women, but men, say your honesty has helped me with this issue. And so, I'm happy to be of service. It's been an interesting couple of years.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ms. Kirby Sommers. Wow, the great author. And I'm looking forward to the release of your new work. I think the only book of yours that I don't have is the one on real estate in New York rentals.
Well, actually, there's one that I did finish last month. It's Creating Epstein, Bill Barr, Leslie Wexner, and the
Okay.
C.I.A.
Right.
That's available through my website, kirbysommers.com. I'm a little hesitant to put it on Amazon only because the pushback against me is so severe. I am a rare person to be exposing this, since I lived in very close proximity for 8 years to someone who was connected to all of these nefarious situations. And so the pushback I get comes in the form of bad reviews. But if you look at all of the reviews, you will see amazing 5-star reviews that say, look at the hate that's happening here. And I think that what people are beginning to understand is that the people who get the most pushback, such as myself, are the people they want silenced. Remember what they did with Gary Webb. So I've been gun shy, Daryl. Maybe after today, I might put it on Amazon and take my, I just hate to have it tarnished by mean people, but I think I may have to leap and just put it up there because I need for you to have a hard copy.
Well, yeah, no, I'm glad you told me that, because I was just going to Amazon. I'll go to your website. I didn't know, I didn't realize that fully, but you told me a bit of information I didn't know about that. Amazon designated your Ghislaine Maxwell book as being on the recommended.
Yeah, I was just sent, in fact, the day before yesterday, I was sent a notice by Amazon about my Ghislaine Maxwell book. So I'm thrilled.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, you've broken through the glass ceiling. I mean, this gives us hope, ladies and gentlemen, right? You're persistent. You published the Epstein letters for 4 years and going strong, and it can happen, and it will happen.
Yeah. Thank you so much for helping me through this period, because you have been an enormous emotional support, and also you've introduced me to your audience, and that's been very gracious and kind of you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your contributions. And with that, Ms. Kirby Sommers, we're going to end the conversation. And boy, the audience is going to be in for a real treat when they watch this interview. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto, and I'm sure you enjoyed this incredible interview with author Kirby Sommers. And as promised, I will announce the 2 winners of her most recent book, The Epstein Project. And the winners are, I'll just give the first name, Melissa. And I have all your full information, so we'll be in touch. And the second winner is Mario. Congratulations. You're in for a treat. Take it from me. Thank you very much again. Good night, everybody.